Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome back. You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. We going live from Midtown, New York. I've wanted to do that since the beginning. You know, I was thinking about it earlier today. I wanted, like, one of my first episodes, I really wanted to mess with Sam. I know he'd get it. You might get this reference, but I totally wanted to introduce and go, good morning, Vietnam. Just to mess with everybody. I'm Adrian Cronauer. That was like my biggest, I'd say, prior to like listening to Joe Rogan and Gary Vaynerchuk, my two biggest influences in what I wanted to do, like ever thinking about wanting to do radio, was Good Morning Vietnam and what was the Christian Slater movie? Pump Up the Volume. Happy Harry Hard On. Talk Hard. Do you remember that? You probably remember that, Tim.
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen that?
No.
Oh, man. You're younger than I thought.
I'm ashamed of some of the movies I haven't seen in my life.
You're young for a bald guy.
I know. I've been 36 since I was like 23.
Oh, that's funny. And I'm still in my 20s. I just have a 40-year-old body. But yeah, I've wanted to do that for so long. But I really wanted to mess with you. It was Sam Himmelstein's show, and I knew that both of you would get it, but I got shy. I'm not shy anymore.
You've never been shy.
I've never been shy. I don't know why I didn't do it. Someday, maybe I just forgot. I was excited. That happens more often than anything, where I get really pumped and I got so many things going on and I got so much to say, and then I just forget. I'm like, fuck, I forgot to do that thing. That would have been so much fun. So whatever. It was 3 months late.
It was great.
I mean, thank you.
Yeah.
I might do it. It
worked out well.
But I like the other thing. Just live from Midtown, New York. Like Conan O'Brien.
Saturday night.
It's Friday afternoon. They probably record Friday afternoon. Anyways. Hi, everybody. How you doing? You're listening to the Entrepreneurial Web. I'm your host, Jeremiah Fox, here with my buddy, Tim Tate. We'll get to him in just a moment. We're going to start with the message of the week. Today, we're taking it back. So I saw this a tweet earlier this week, and this lady was asking if you could change one thing, take one thing back, personally or historically, what would it be? And I thought for a second, I'm like I'm cool with my own trajectory. I made mistakes, whatever. I own that. I'm cool with all that. But if there's one thing I could take back, and this makes me think of you, that I feel like would really like potentially change the way the world behaves, is I would have prevented the untimely death of Bob Marley. That's one of the things I would take back. And so my quote today is by Bob Marley from an interview. I saw this when I was quite young. He probably did it in the late 70s, and I'm going to do my best to translate the patois. I thought about doing it in his little language, but I think I've quoted enough people today already. I've imitated enough people. What did he say? He said, my life is for plenty of people. If my life is just for me, I don't want it. My life is here to help plenty of people. And later on, they released his son released a documentary about his life, not that long ago, just a few years ago. And it debuted here in New York in some small theater. My wife and I went to see it. And one of his lady friends, Cindy Breakspear, the Miss USA or whatever back in the day, one of his baby mamas, she said something in the documentary, same tone, that his goal was to do things that he knew were good for himself, but good for the world as well. So like, yeah, sure, he loved music, he loved to smoke weed, he loved to dance, he loved all these things, but he was like, but if everybody just does it, the world will be a better place for it, you know? And I think a lot of what you do and what you stand for and represent is the same thing. You have a little bit less hair.
A little bit.
Your pigment's a little lighter than his. That beard, though, you got the beard, bro.
I'm working on
You got
it.
the Marley beard. Rasta. So, and it was fun because I was hired as, we were just talking about music and my background in music. And in the early days, I was like 16 and I was hired to play for a working reggae band. I was living in Virginia Beach in Norfolk, Virginia at the time. It was like beach lifestyle, you know, that kind of thing played off. And there were a lot of West Indians that moved there because it was work, you know, they could live. But there were like all these like Caribbean themed venues, you know, like just locally owned. I'm not talking about like the chains, you know, just like local places. They put like fake palm trees and paint the exterior red, green, and gold. But there was work. But these guys, I don't know, they were a working band, and I don't know how they got hold of me, but I ended up being their drummer, like the token white dude in the back.
That's where it's at.
But I learned a lot then, because at the time I was just like your average American consumer kid, you know, like I ate fast food and I watched a bunch of television and I just didn't give a shit about anything, you know. I didn't think about what I put in my body or anything like that. I was always athletic. I enjoyed, you know, accomplishment physically as far as that goes. But those guys were like, they've started to talk about ITAL living and the environment. And that was like the first I'd ever heard of it. You know, this was like early 90s, you know. It's just like, wait, what? We have to take care of the we have to take care of the planet and our body? Like, damn, I was having so much fun. But I quickly adopted it, and like that was life-changing for me. And going along, I always hoped to like fold some of that into what I did for a living. And what's really inspirational is meeting people like yourself and companies like Think Coffee that are doing it like big time. You know, it's really inspirational. So thank you, Tim. Again, Tim Tate. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself, Tim?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, so, you know, like I'm not a professional chief sustainability officer or
He just
anything
acts
like
like
that.
one.
You know, I've worked in food and beverage for most of my life. You know, I started off in as soon as I graduated from high school, I started working in restaurants. You know, as a busser,
Where'd you
a server,
You're from
Seattle, Washington area.
Seattle, yeah.
Yeah. So you know, that's like where
That's why you're in coffee.
that's where coffee really began in the U.S. as far as, you know,
Yeah.
espresso wasn't really
And
much
the
of a thing.
current
Cappuccinos,
coffee
lattes, like
culture.
that's
Yeah.
where things grew from. Strangely enough, I didn't get into coffee until I moved to New York.
That makes sense.
But you know, coffee's a flexible job. It's great for students. It's great for performers. That's what I went to college for here in New York. For music and theater.
Oh, really?
So yeah, you know,
Where'd you go to school?
I went to school at a community college in Washington that was pretty well known for their jazz
Oh,
program.
I thought you were saying you went to school here.
And then, yeah, you know, I was doing some theater shows in Washington, and I wasn't really getting to the place, like the professional development that I wanted in Washington State. And I got fired from a show that I was doing. And I was like, that's it. I've had it. I'm going to go to New York. I'm going to go
to a place where they really mess with people.
Yeah. I'm going to go like do
I
it.
can get fired every day.
Yes. I'm just going to take like continued disappointment, like 30 times a day for,
That's
you
good.
know?
That's good for the soul.
Yeah.
Man.
It really
Absolutely.
it really beat some discipline into
That's
me.
exactly why
is
I
what
moved
it
to
did
New
to
York.
me.
Yeah.
New York, like
Definitely.
going to school for theater and for music, and then trying to make it professionally in this town, like really instilled like a major sense of work ethic into me. And you know, I worked, I don't know how many hours a day, every day. I went to college, and you know,
did you go to school here as well?
I went to school at the American Musical and Dramatic Academy on the Upper West Side.
And when you were studying in Washington, you said jazz and theater. Was this for vocals or this?
Yeah, well, so I sort of fell in love with jazz, you know, from like 6th grade on. You know, I started playing like
I was in my 20s.
Yeah, I mean, I started playing saxophone. I was one of those weird teenagers who like loved jazz, and there are like hardly any of those in the world. Really, you know, it's like jazz is the tiniest idiom of music. Really,
it's like all of Syracuse, New York. Like,
I mean, like the biggest jazz stars, they have like, you know, 50,000 followers on Facebook or whatever, where, you know, instead of like 4 billion,
and like sell the biggest one sell 50,000.
They hardly make any money. Like you get into jazz because you love it, and like not because you have like these visions of grandeur. Like, it's not gonna happen, really, you know. But that's where my love for music really started. You know, traveling around to music festivals, and you know, competing in solo competitions, and somewhere like around when I was like 15 years old, I did the musical Oliver at a little community theater organization in my hometown, and I discovered like my next love in music, and I was like, and there's also this thing of, you know, trying to like be a human being on stage and conveying relationships to people, and like that brings this, you're still being a musician, but then you're bringing this other aspect in as well. And so I was a really kind of complicated teenager where I didn't have like one thing that I loved to do, and you know, like that's always sort of the way I've been like throughout my trajectory as a human.
That's great though. You shouldn't have like, that's silly. Just be like, do this one thing.
I don't know. I mean,
That's like me. I
give props to people who, yeah, right. Yeah. Like you've started more businesses than like anybody I know. Like, you know, like
I don't know
for a while I was calling you like the mayor of Windsor Terrace.
Oh, that's been done. You got to come up with a new name. I need a different, because I'm apolitical. I'm not into politics at all.
No, you don't seem like a mayor at all.
No, I want to be more like a benevolent, like mob leader, you know, like the capo of a family, but like
you're not scary enough.
We give out hugs.
Like,
exactly. No, like different. It's like, no, we're not gonna fuck you up. We'll work this out. Yeah. You know, your kneecaps are safe, but
kill you with love.
But don't mess with me, man.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess like that's sort of how I've always been. Is like, you know, I have a lot of different things that I love to do. You know, like I love sports. I love music. I love theater. I love food. I love drinks. It's like, and these are kind of all things that I've sort of, you know, pursued in one way or another throughout my life. And like, you know, maybe, you know, some people say, master of none or something, because you're doing all these things, you know. But
I don't subscribe to that.
What I hope is that, you know, having all these different interests and following them professionally really kind of adds up to something special.
Yeah, I have an old boss and mentor who I worked for this guy when I was like 17. And he's been very successful. He's now franchised his restaurants, and he's opened in multiple states, and he's a really heavy dude. And you know, but he started young, and he opened his first restaurant at like 23 or 24. You know, I was almost 40. Yeah, I opened mine. You know,
well, 40 is more the regular,
right?
You know, like,
but I talk to him often, and he's like, he said to me, he's like, you're gonna peak at like 50 because you're just into so many things. And he's like, you're really good at all of them. It just takes you more time because you're constantly working on and folding in new skills. He's like, but it's just going to be a longer wait before you hit. But he's like, when you do, it's going to be full. And you don't need to eliminate anything. Because I would call him and be like, oh my God, like when am I going to like settle down? And he's like, you're not. Yeah. Just like do it. Just be you, boo. You know what I'm saying?
There's a lot to that, I think. You know, like I have a ton of respect for people who do choose like that one thing that they want to be truly great at, and then follow that for their whole life. You know, like I have a lot of respect for that person, you know, because that's not something I've ever been able to do.
No, it's not inherently me.
Yeah. You know, so like those people, man, you know, I got a lot of love for those people. Like my brother is that kind of person, you know, he's worked for the same company for, you know, 20 years now. And he's really like grown to be like one of the big leaders, you know, and so good for him. That's awesome.
Yeah.
You know?
No, you have to be yourself. It's self-awareness is a really big part of it. And once I finally came to terms with that, because it was the same for me. Like when I was, you know, 17 years old, I was running a restaurant and I was running a band at the same time. And ultimately it led to me dropping out of high school because I would get home at like 2 o'clock in the morning all the time. And I was having fun.
Yeah.
I was not a good student, you know. I did fine. Like I tested really well. I knew the material. It was just like, this sucks. I'm making cash over here, you know, and this is what I want to do. And I've been torn between those two specifically for decades, you know, where I was like, I'm going to be a musician now. And then I'm like, no, I'm sick of that. I'm going to be a restaurant guy now. And I'm like, oh, I'm sick of that. I'm going to go back and And now I'm working on this fusion of all of it, you know, in a way where there's still separate businesses, but I found ways to, it's just taken a long time. But I love this about the show though, where like I have guests on that I know really well. And like, I've known you for years and I had no idea you had a music background.
Yeah. I never talked about it. It's weird.
No, it's awesome.
It's like this thing that I have in the back corner, you know, that I don't talk about very often. I don't know, because like sometimes I feel like in the business community, like you bring up like theater, acting, you know, like music, like
somehow
for some reason, like artistic pursuits sometimes don't add up to much in the perception of the business world.
They're like, you're not a serious business person.
Yeah, but I don't think people a lot of times realize like what goes into becoming like a solid artist
and the contribution it makes to you
absolutely
as a business-minded person. It's tremendous. Cool. Well, we'll elaborate on that a little bit more. We're going to take a little short break. You're listening to Entrepreneurial Web.